from this to this for under $7,000.
Including a complete 12-volt install and a 2-inch suspension lift. This week on YouTube, we continue turning this tired, banged-up GU into an off-road and touring weapon.
Check this out, we just went and bought this second-hand steel tray for Andy's GU for 800 bucks. It does need a little bit of TLC, but the good thing is Andy's super keen to hook in and paint it himself, which would be a really good opportunity for him to learn. Before he does that though, I just want to go through it and show you a couple of things to look out for so that if you're going to buy a second-hand tray like this for your four-wheel drive, you don't get caught out. Now, one of the most important things to look out for when you're buying particularly a second-hand steel tray is rust. Now you can see here there's a little bit, and also on the tail section of the tray as well, but the good thing is this is only surface rust, so it's not that much of a big deal. And you can sand this back, coat it and protect it nicely, and it'll be good to go. Where you need to look out for though is in the structure of the tray, because if there's rust there, then it's usually a sign you need to walk away. Now, a big thing with steel trays is how heavy they are. This tray does weigh a fair bit, and it's worth keeping in mind, particularly in the floor here. This is all steel checker plate, so it's quite heavy. One thing I've done on my tray though is the frame of the tray is steel, but the floor is alloy, and it just helps to cut down the weight a little bit. Now obviously you can't do that with every tray because sometimes the floor will make up part of the structure. But if you find a tray that you like and the floor's a bit rusty or a bit old or something like that, you might find that replacing it with some alloy checker plate will help to cut down the weight but still give you a strong tray for four-wheel driving. This one, for example, you can tell the previous owners had a canopy bolted on it. There's a few cracks in the floor where obviously there was a fair bit of weight from the canopy pulling through. So Andy might even, if he decides to put a canopy on, maybe he could even cut this section out and replace it, but we'll see how we go. Now the main area you want to look out for rust is in the structure of the tray. So for example here with this RHS, sticking your head down there with a torch and just checking to see there's no real bad rust coming through, because what can happen is if there's old bolt holes that come through these structural parts of the tray, water can get in there, and obviously if it can't get out, it's just going to stay there and accumulate and eventually rust. So that's a real important area to keep an eye out for. The other thing too, just have a quick look at the mounts of the tray, particularly if it's a DIY tray. Have a look at how they've designed their mounts. So these ones, for example, is a bit of sort of 3 or 4 mil flat bar that's been folded. Now, it should do the job, but over time, if Andy's going to do some hard four-wheel driving, plus maybe put a canopy on or something like that, running a little gusset on here might not be a bad idea. So just have a look at the mount design and you can decide for yourself with what you plan to do with the tray, whether or not they'll be strong enough to do the job.
As you know, we're on a shoestring budget with this build, which means everything that has to get done needs to be done at home in the shed. So Andy's first job is to get stuck into the tray. Using an angle grinder and a wire wheel, he's gone over every inch of the tray, trying to move as much of the surface rust as possible. By doing this, he's ensuring the Brunox can effectively penetrate and remove any remaining rust. Next up, using 1 litre of Brunox, a roller and a brush for any hard to get places, Andy goes over the entire tray 3 times. This ensures that all rust is neutralised, and also protects the bare metal from further corrosion. The best thing about Brunox is because it's also a primer, if you want to, you can apply a coating directly over the top. But in this case, to ensure the tray is 100% sealed and the Raptor will go on nicely, Andy's also going to apply a coating of Raptor epoxy primer before he does the Raptor coating itself. Just remember that the most important thing with Raptor is to spend the time doing the prep work and cleaning properly. The more effort you put into cleaning and prepping the surface you're coating, the better the Raptor will go on and the longer it'll last. And lastly, with all the hard work done, it's finally time to get the Raptor on.
How nice has this tray come up? Andy's never Raptor coated anything before and he wanted to give it a go. So over the Christmas holidays, he hooked in and did it all himself, and I reckon it's come up an absolute treat.
Andy's done an awesome job turning this around. He's put the work in and done it right. And I can't stress enough how important this is. Preparation is key when restoring something like this. Cut corners, and what looks good tomorrow won't look good in 6 months, I can promise you that. Do it once, do it right, and you'll have something that'll last.
I tell you what, mate, you've done a cracker of a job Raptor coating the tray. Here's one for you though. Having never done it before and being quite new to Raptor, was there anything that you came across when you were doing all the work that you reckon someone watching who wants to give something like this a go themselves but isn't quite sure where to start, are there any tips you found along the way?
Yeah, definitely. I think preparation is key. You have to get that down pat first, because then there's no point painting it, obviously.
Yep.
So I think that, you know, sanding, wire wheeling, then brunoxing.
Okay, so you use brunox on the tray before you...
Yeah, definitely. So I used the 1 litre roller, and I just put that on. I went over 3 coats because this was quite a rusty tray.
Yep.
And then I knew once I've done that, let it dry, it was right to go. Then primed it and painted it. I think it's come up pretty good.
100%, mate, 100%. Well, as the age-old saying goes, painting's in the prep work, and definitely no stranger to that now.
Yeah.
What do you say we hook into some camping and touring mods now, hey?
Yep.
Cool, let's do it.
Sounds good.
So Andy's got his new tray on, it's Raptored and it's looking schmick. The canopy still needs a Raptor coating, but in the meantime, I'm going to get stuck into the 12-volt install. So we're going to be going with a permanent dual battery install in the GU, and the reason for that is I've had this exact setup in my Hilux for a couple of years and it works really well. Because this is a slimline Kickass battery, you can mount it behind the seat so it's out of the way and you don't have to worry about it. Particularly with a single cab, because space is such a premium, having a nice, tidy, compact setup like this in the cab means that it'll free up space in the canopy. And also another great advantage of that is it means that if Andy's running with just a flat tray, doesn't have the canopy on, he still has a complete 12-volt setup ready to go. Righto, so I'm just going to run you through what we're going to be installing in the GU. So first up will be one of these Kickass 25 amp DC chargers. Now, these are awesome because they come plug and play with the Anderson plugs on them, but check this out. They've recently put one of these triple Anderson plugs on. Why do you need one of these? So this is your positive from your battery, negative to your battery, and then also this third wire is an ignition wire. So if you have a modern vehicle with a smart alternator that isn't going to always charge at full capacity, what this wire does is when your vehicle is on, it tells the charger that the vehicle's running, and this charger will kick in and charge your second battery. On an older vehicle, this isn't as important. You still can connect it if you want to, but for this, we're just going to be using a double Anderson plug. And the beauty about this setup is you can either use their triple one like this if you want to, or you can plug a double straight into the positive and negative. Also comes with a solar input as well, and you can charge a range of different batteries, including lithium as well. Awesome bit of kit. Righto, so I've just pulled the passenger seat out because I want to mock up where I want the 12-volt setup to sit. And I've decided on behind the passenger seat here, and the reason for that, well, there's 2 main reasons. The first being having it on this side will just help offset the weight a little bit with the driver. And then the second reason is Andy's planning to run his canopy and fridge setup on the passenger side. So by having a 12-volt setup on this side of the vehicle, it means there'll be a slightly shorter cable run to the fridge just to help minimize voltage drop. But I reckon that's going to sit perfectly in there. It's a perfect little spot for a 12-volt setup. Righto, so it's time to install the Kickass wiring loom. So the beauty about this setup is it's completely pre-wired, so all I need to do is install it, plug it in, and I'm good to go. I've also got plenty of cable to play with as well, which means I can choose a real nice path for it. I'm going to come through this grommet in the firewall and run down around the passenger seat following factory wiring, and then up to the charger and make it nice and neat. Righto, so the battery tray has been mounted and I've just chucked the battery in. Next up, I've got to mount the charger. Now, I've also got a little alloy bracket for the charger to sit on, so it'll sit right next to the battery just there. But now, Andy's just finishing up running the wiring in the engine bay and I'm connecting it up in here. And again, this triple Anderson plug just makes it super simple. So it's just active in there, in that one, then you got negative in there and your ignition wire in there, and then it just connects up to the triple Anderson on the charger. You're good to go. How easy is that? Righto, so just finishing off the last bits with the 12-volt, and check this out. So this is another cool little bracket that comes with the Kickass battery tray. And the beauty about it is it bolts to the side of the battery tray, and you've got a little spot inside here to mount the charger so it's out of the way. But then you've also got this front plate here when you can mount whatever you want on there. So a fuse block, or maybe even a USB point, or anything else, any other monitors or something like that. We've decided that it'd be a good spot for the 240-volt charger, because it means that when Andy wants to charge it up, the little cable for the 240-volt is just right here. He can just grab it and plug it straight in. And then the DC charger's tucked out of the way. All I got to do is bolt it to the side of the battery tray and then plug it in, because all the wiring comes out of the bottom here. That's good to go. How unreal is that? We've got a full Kickass 12-volt system in the back of the big GU now. Got 170 amp hour slimline AGM, a 25 amp DC charger, a 240-volt charger, and input for solar to plug straight into the DC as well. The best part is though, check this out. Wouldn't even know it's there. That's sick. While I'm putting the passenger seat back in, I thought I'd chuck in one of these Cap Industries fire extinguisher brackets. Now, every single four-wheel drive needs a fire extinguisher. I reckon it's mandatory, but the beauty about these is these brackets are made to suit the vehicle. So this one's made for a GU, obviously, so it's just a case of unbolting the front two seat bolts, and then it'll sit in nicely, and it means that you've got quick access to a fire extinguisher if you need it. So next up, it's time to do something about the suspension in the vehicle. The old coils are sagging and pretty tired, and the shocks are pretty fed as well. So we're going to put in a 2-inch lift from Fulcrum. So we've got a new set of formula shocks, and we've got some new coils as well. We've gone with a 2-inch suspension lift for the GU, and the reason for that is the 2-inch lift will give a bit more room for the 33s to move through their range of motion, and also a 2-inch lift and a set of 33s will get you pretty much anywhere you need to go. Just take the Pony for example. It's just got a mild 2-inch lift and some 33-inch tyres, and you have a look at where we've taken it, so I reckon the GU will be just fine. I ordered all this suspension off Fulcrum's website, and the beauty was just selected a 2-inch lift and they sent it to me. But the beauty about that website is they're also doing their click and fit option as well. And what that means is if you're not super confident to put a suspension lift in your vehicle, you can opt for them to fit it at one of their stores. You just order the suspension online, choose the store, and they'll fit it for you. But we're going to be doing it ourselves on the GU. So it's time to get the old suspension out, get the shiny new stuff in.
The process of replacing the suspension on the GU is quite simple if you're willing to give it a go yourself. Before I started, I measured from the hub to the bottom of the wheel arches on each corner. So once I completed it, I could see how much of a difference the upgrade has made. First, we simply jack her up by the diff, take off the tyres, and while supporting the chassis with a pair of jack stands, we can drop the diff, taking the weight off the suspension. It's also handy here, before you lower the diff down, undo the two bottom shock mounts, which will allow the diff to articulate further to the ground, and it'll make it easier to get the coils and shocks out.
So we've got the new coils to go in. Now, you may be able to see on camera that this one is the right-hand side one. It's nice and easily marked so you can tell, but it's also just a little bit taller than the left-hand one. And the reason for that is obviously on the driver's side, you're going to have a little bit more weight of the driver in the vehicle all the time. So by having just this coil a little bit taller, it means it accounts for the weight of the driver. Righto, so the front suspension's all in, new coils and shocks, so now we're just going to flip the vehicle around and start on the rear. A handy trick just to help you get shock bushes on if you don't have any grease with you from the kit is just get a little bit of rubber grease and just put it on the inside of the bushes just to help slide onto the mounts for the shock. Just makes it a bit easier when you're putting the shocks on. When it comes to putting suspension in your four-wheel drive, there's one thing that's really important, and it's to get the spring rate right for the load you're carrying. Now on leaf-sprung vehicles, a leaf spring is much better for carrying a range of different weights, which is why they're quite common in the back of dual cab utes on the market. But with coil springs, it can be a bit harder to get your spring rate right. There is one way to do it though, and that's by using the correct spring. So with coil springs, you generally have two types. You've got a linear rate spring and a progressive rate spring. To show you an example, this old coil that we took out of the back, this is a linear rate spring. And what I mean by that is, you can see that the wraps are consistent throughout the whole spring. So that's pretty much good for one load. Now over here, you've got a progressive rate spring. And what I mean by that is you can see here how the coil wraps are tighter together at the top. But as it gets further down, they're a bit more spaced out. What that allows you to do is carry slightly different weights. So where that would be perfect is, for example, in the back of the GU, and he's going to have a canopy on sometimes, or he might take it off if he's doing some tougher tracks, or you can put a motorbike on the back and it'll still be okay. So for example, a linear rate spring in the front is very common because the load isn't going to change that much. You've got your engine, your bulbar, your winch, your spotlights and what have you, and that's about it. So you can get away with putting a linear rate spring in the front. But if you've got a ute where the loads are changing, it's a coil sprung one like this, that's where a progressive rate spring might be more suited for comfortable driving. Then when you load it up, it's still going to be suitable. How unreal does this look? We put a full 2-inch Formula 4x4 lift kit in from Fulcrum, and the big GU is sitting way nicer already. It'll also allow us to have much more clearance for the big 33-inch Mickey Thompsons. It's worth noting though that fitting a larger suspension lift to your vehicle won't increase under diff clearance. The only thing that's going to do that is larger tyres. What fitting a larger lift will do is give you more clearance to run bigger tyres, and it'll also allow you to get the weights right to suit the load you're carrying, like we mentioned earlier. You also might have noticed Andy's chucked a new bar on the front of the GU as well. So he picked this up second hand, and he also managed to score himself some scrub bars and side steps. They've still got to go on, obviously, just got to give them a Raptor coating. But in the meantime, Andy's chucked on some 9-inch big red spotties. We've got a winch to put in the front. We're getting there with this build. It's almost time to take it out into the bush.
Whilst I've been finishing up on the suspension, Andy's jumped back over onto the canopy. With the Raptor left over from the tray, he's decided to give it a spray to match the rest of the build. So firstly, he's scuffed up the canopy with a light grade of sandpaper, which will help the primer stick to the surface. Following that, a coat of Raptor primer to prepare the alloy, and then finally a coat of Raptor to finish it off. Nice work, mate. You can see here how nicely Raptor bonds to a whole bunch of different surfaces, including aluminium. So, what's our budget looking like? If you remember from the last episode, after some initial key mods and repairs, the GU had cost us a total of $15,632. So let's have a look at where the newest mods put us. The tray was $800. The tray restoration, which included Brunox, primer, a Raptor gun and 5 litres of Raptor for the tray and canopy, cost $557. The complete Kickass 12-volt system, including a 170 amp hour battery, cost $1,248. A full 2-inch lift fulcrum suspension upgrade cost $1,288. A set of big red spotties with a wiring harness cost us $350. And lastly, the canopy Andy picked up new was $2,500, bringing us to a total of $6,743. So, with all the work done this episode, that brings us to a total build cost of $22,375. Considering how far that big GU's come, I think that's pretty amazing. We've almost finished turning this tired old farm ute around into a capable off-road touring machine. And the best part is, Andy and I have done it in the shed with the help of a few mates. That said, we're not finished yet.
What's next for the big GU? Well, we're almost there. We've got a couple of other little bits and pieces to chuck on, like those scrubbies and side steps. Even got a winch for the front bar as well. And then we're gonna be taking it out into the bush so we can finally test out the vehicle and see how it behaves. It'll also be really good for Andy to get some seat time as well, so he can learn how the big GU drives. If I'm lucky, I might even be able to take the Luxy out as well, see if the big girl can keep up, eh? Make sure you keep an eye out for that, because we're going to be dropping that episode in a couple of weeks. Other than that, I'll catch you next time.